The nurse's voice trembled as she pronounced my name. My son, merely 12 years of age, lay in the intensive care unit, his body marred by a collapsed lung, 3 fractured ribs, and a broken skull. The physician detailing the assault employed the term sustained, a word that echoed relentlessly in my mind. Sustained. It implied that my child hadn't merely suffered a single blow, they had endured a relentless, unceasing assault. And the individual I had placed the most implicit trust in throughout my life, my wife of 15 years, knew precisely who the perpetrator was. Remember to hit like and subscribe for more narratives of betrayal, and share your city or country in the comments. The precise moment of fragmentation remains vivid in my memory. It was a Tuesday evening, and I was in the process of securing the hardware store where I was employed. My phone vibrated, an unfamiliar number. I nearly chose not to answer, yet an inexplicable impulse compelled me to pick up.
Mr. Nathaniel Graves.
The voice, professional and composed, carried the authoritative cadence of a police dispatcher. My stomach clenched even before she completed her sentence. Your son, Marcus, was admitted to county medical approximately 40 minutes ago. He's been involved in an accident. You must come immediately. An accident? That's what I understood them to convey. An accident? My mind grappled with the notion, envisioning a bicycle mishap or a car collision. I couldn't process anything more severe.
I drove to the hospital in a daze, flagrantly disregarding every speed limit, my hands trembling so violently that my grip on the steering wheel was tenuous. The parking lot seemed to stretch interminably, and the emergency room doors felt impossibly heavy, as if weighing 1,000 pounds. The waiting area was stark and brightly lit, characteristic of hospitals, the fluorescent glow casting an almost surreal pallor over everything, akin to being trapped within an inescapable nightmare. A nurse, her eyes betraying weariness, directed me toward the ICU, specifically to the 3rd floor, room 317. Upon entering, my own son was unrecognizable to me. Marcus lay amidst a symphony of beeping and hissing machines that mechanically regulated his breathing. His face was grotesquely swollen, both eyes bruised shut. His left arm was encased in a cast, and stitches traced a line across his forehead. The monitor above him displayed his oxygen saturation and heart rate, numbers that underscored his desperate fight for survival. I clasped his hand, the one not immobilized by the cast, and crumbled. Not tears, not yet, but a profound internal shattering. Within my chest, something fundamentally fractured. A doctor entered, a woman with compassionate eyes but a stern mouth. She informed me that my son had been discovered unconscious in an alley behind Middleton Park by a jogger. The preliminary assessment indicated blunt force trauma to his torso and head. Sustained blunt force. That unsettling phrase resurfaced. We've stabilized him, she continued, but he has a pneumothorax, a collapsed lung, and we've had to intubate him. He's currently sedated for his safety. There's also bleeding in the subdural space surrounding his brain, which we're monitoring closely. The next 48 hours are critical. I was speechless, incapable of forming questions. I could only gaze at my son's broken form, consumed by the agonizing question of how this tragedy could have transpired. Then the police officer arrived. Detective James Collins, a tall man with streaks of gray in his dark hair, bore the kind of fatigued expression that comes from an overexposure to arduous realities. He inquired if I had a moment to speak. A moment, as if this were a trivial interlude, not a crisis where my son clung to life support. "Do you know anyone named Adrian Voss?" he asked. I shook my head in negation. Adrian Voss is 26 years old, has a record, assault, drug possession, probation violation. He was identified by a witness who observed the attack. According to that witness, your son was specifically targeted. Voss knew precisely who he was looking for. My mind struggled to connect the disparate pieces of information. Targeted? He's 12. He's just a child. Why would anyone target a child?
Detective Collins shifted his weight, an uncomfortable gesture, like someone about to utter something profoundly revelatory. "That's what we're diligently trying to ascertain," he stated. "But here's what we know. Voss was compensated. Someone provided him with money and a description, instructing him to inflict severe harm upon your son."
The witness overheard him confirm this. The room began to tilt, the walls seemingly closing in. "Paid." My voice, now foreign and distant, echoed, "Paid by whom?" "That's the focus of our current investigation. We're examining motives, family disputes, business conflicts, revenge scenarios." He paused. "Do you have any adversaries? Anyone who might wish to harm you through your family?" I reflected on my life. I am not a man who cultivates enemies. I manage a hardware store. I return home. I dedicate time to my family. I coach Marcus's soccer team on weekends. My existence is ordinary, utterly unremarkable. Just then, my phone vibrated. A text message from my wife, Eliza. "Where are you? Why aren't you home?" I hadn't even contacted her. My sole focus had been reaching Marcus, causing me to completely neglect informing my wife that our son was in the hospital. "I need to call my wife," I told the detective. "She doesn't know yet." He nodded, but there was an unsettling quality in his gaze, something that compelled me to look up. "What?" I pressed. "What aren't you disclosing to me?" "We are still actively investigating," he replied cautiously. But the witness, the individual who placed the 911 call, mentioned someone else being present initially, a woman who spoke with Adrian Voss before the assault. She departed before we could identify her. My throat tightened. What did she look like? Early 40s, dark hair. The witness wasn't entirely precise with the details, but they stated the woman appeared to know Voss, seemed familiar with him. I rose, walked to the window, and stared out at the parking lot and the city beyond, paralyzed, unable to move, unable to breathe. "Mr. Graves." I retrieved my phone, locating our most recent family photograph, taken 3 months prior at Marcus's school event. Eliza, Marcus, and I, all beaming at the camera, as if everything in our world was flawless. In that moment, standing within a hospital room, witnessing my son's chest rise and fall solely because a machine forcibly pushed air into his lungs, I understood. I knew, with a chilling certainty, precisely who that woman was, and I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. I navigated to Eliza's location history on my phone, a feature she had granted me access to years ago when our mutual trust was absolute. The data illuminated my screen like a stark confession. At 4:47 p.m. today, her phone had pinged from a location 2 blocks from Middleton Park, the exact place, the precise time Marcus was enduring unimaginable torment. When Eliza entered the ICU 20 minutes later, there was no panic in her demeanor. She wasn't frantically searching the corridor, her eyes desperately seeking her son's room number. She moved with the assuredness of someone who already knew precisely where to go, as if she had already been informed of the details. I observed her approach Marcus's bed. Her hand trembled as she reached for his arm, but her facial expression remained composed. Too composed. A mother confronting her child on life support should crumble, should wail, should collapse right there on the linoleum floor. Eliza simply stood, gazing at his swollen face as if looking at someone she once knew but could no longer fully recall. "How long have you known?" I inquired from the corner of the room. She flinched. "Nathaniel, how long have you known that Adrian Voss was dangerous?" The color drained from her face. She opened her mouth, then closed it, and in that profound silence, I found my answer. "You were at the park," I stated. "Your phone pinged 2 blocks away at 4:47 p.m. That's when they found Marcus. That's when the attack occurred." Eliza clutched the bedrail so tightly her knuckles blanched. "You've been tracking me?" "Answer the question." She slowly sank into the visitor's chair as if her legs could no longer support her. Her shoulders hunched inward, making herself appear smaller, almost vanishing.
When she finally spoke, her voice was a mere whisper. 6 months ago, I joined a gym.
I was attempting to regain my physique. I was trying to do something for myself because our marriage had grown quiet. We had grown quiet. She met my gaze, and I discerned something in her eyes that sent a twist of unease through my stomach. Guilt, but also something else. Justification. He was a trainer there, Adrian. He was charming. He listened to me. He made me feel seen. You had an affair? Yes. She offered no denial, no excuses. She simply uttered it, a confession in the solemnity of a courtroom. It persisted for 3 months. Then I realized what I was doing. I realized I was discarding 15 years for someone who didn't even know my true name. So I terminated it. When? 3 weeks ago, and he didn't accept it. Eliza shook her head. He became obsessive. He would text me, call me from various numbers when I blocked him. He appeared at the grocery store. He even came by the house one day when you weren't home and stood in our driveway for an hour simply watching. My blood ran cold. Why didn't you tell me? Because I was ashamed. Her voice cracked. Because I knew it would destroy you. Because I knew you would look at me the way you're looking at me right now, as if I'm someone you don't recognize. You are someone I don't recognize. The words hung heavily between us. Around us, the ICU maintained its steady rhythm, monitors beeping, nurses silently gliding past the door, our son fighting for his life in a hospital bed while his parents disintegrated in a corner. Today he called me, Eliza continued, her hands trembling. He insisted he needed to see me. He claimed he had something crucial to convey. I thought he was merely being manipulative again, attempting to draw me back in. So I agreed to meet him, just to tell him one final time that it was definitively over, that I was done, that he needed to leave me alone at the park. Yes, I met him by the parking lot. He seemed different, angry in a way I had never witnessed before. He kept repeating phrases like, "You think you can just walk away, and you think there are no consequences?" I warned him to back off, that I would contact the police if he continued to harass me. And then he uttered something that sent a chill through my very being. I waited. He said, "Your son goes to Washington Middle School, right? I saw his picture on your Instagram. He's got your eyes." I felt the room subtly tilt. At that precise point, I knew something was wrong, truly and gravely wrong. Upon my inquiry into his statement and his mention of Marcus, he offered a cold, vacant smile, uttering, "Sometimes individuals must endure pain to learn lessons. Sometimes they need to comprehend the sensation of loss." "And why hadn't you seen fit to notify us?" Eliza's voice escalated, edged with desperation. I dashed to my car and sped away from him. My intention was to return home and disclose everything. I was going to contact the police, but then my phone died. My unreliable old phone gave out just as I was driving, and I had to locate a power source. By the time I secured a charger and was prepared to head home, your call came through from the hospital. The sequence of events was now falling into place in my mind. All those critical moments that should have converged but did not. All the warnings that dissipated into the voids between us. "We must inform the police," I asserted. "No." Eliza rose, her expression revealing a fear I had never before witnessed in her, a raw, primal terror. "Nathaniel, if I admit my involvement with Adrian, if I tell them I met with him today, they'll assume I orchestrated Marcus's predicament. They'll believe I was complicit in this. I could face imprisonment." "You were complicit in this." "I was not. I had nothing to do with Marcus being harmed. Nothing." "You harbored secrets. You introduced a dangerous individual into our lives and then failed to warn us when he imperiled our son. You had an affair with him." My voice remained steady, yet each word felt like an internal laceration. "You made choices, Eliza. Those choices directly resulted in Marcus lying in that bed." Before she could respond, a knock echoed at the door.
A man in a Navy uniform stood in the entry. He appeared to be in his early 40s, a scar tracing from his left temple down to his jaw. His eyes, an unyielding gray, were fixed intently on me. "Mr. Graves, I'm Colin Reeves. I'm a retired Navy SEAL, and I've come here tonight because I heard about Adrian Voss." He stepped into the room, his formidable presence seemingly occupying every available inch of space. 3 years ago, Voss attacked me in a parking garage. He attempted to kill me, placing me in the hospital for 2 months. Eliza emitted a faint sound. Fear, recognition, something shattering within her. "I've been searching for him ever since," Colin continued, his jaw tightening. "And when I learned about your son, I knew. Voss doesn't just attack random people, he targets them. There's always a motive." His gaze shifted to Eliza. "And I believe you know precisely why he targeted your son." In that instant, everything fundamentally shifted. It was no longer solely about my wife's infidelity. It wasn't merely about betrayal, falsehoods, or broken pledges. There was a more sinister undercurrent to it all, something Colin Reeves had relentlessly pursued for 3 years. And now my son had unwittingly become entangled in whatever that dark reality was. Colin drew a chair next to Marcus's bed and settled into it, as if possessing an inherent right to be there, as if this was his investigation, his battle. His eyes never left Eliza as he spoke. "Adrian Voss exhibits a particular pattern," he stated, his voice low and deliberate. "He doesn't engage in indiscriminate attacks. He targets individuals connected to situations he attributes to his own misfortunes. 3 years ago, he came after me because I testified against his brother in a court case. His brother was convicted of trafficking. Voss blamed me for his family's disintegration." I glanced at Eliza. Her face had become ashen. "So this is connected to you?" I asked her. "To something you did before you encountered Voss?" "No," she quickly retorted. "I didn't do anything to him. I barely knew him before." "Before what?" Colin leaned forward. "Before you started sleeping with him, or before you ended things with him?" The manner in which he posed the question made it clear he already possessed the answers. This was not an interrogation, it was a confirmation. "I believe Voss approached you intentionally," Colin continued. "I think he observed you, investigated you, and decided you would be his instrument, whether you realized it or not." "That's preposterous," Eliza whispered. "He was just a man at the gym. That's all he was." "Was he?" Colin produced his phone and displayed a photograph to us. Adrian Voss, considerably younger, stood beside a woman in a wedding dress. "This is his brother's wife. She committed suicide 6 months after his brother's incarceration. Couldn't cope with the shame, couldn't cope with being alone. So Adrian has been seeking someone to harm ever since." The photograph seemed to exert a profound weight on the room's atmosphere. I grasped then that this transcended Eliza's affair. This wasn't merely about a spurned lover seeking retribution on my family. This was something far darker, something meticulously calculated. "How did he know about me?" I inquired. "That's what I'm endeavoring to ascertain," Colin replied. "Eliza, where did Voss take you? Where did you two meet when you were together?" Eliza's hands fidgeted nervously in her lap. "Sometimes at his apartment, sometimes at hotels, sometimes in his car." "His car? Did he ever drive you anywhere near your house? Anywhere near Marcus's school?" "Once, after soccer practice, he picked me up and we drove around for a bit. He said he wanted to learn more about my life, so I pointed out Marcus's school. I showed him where I dropped Marcus off in the mornings." Her voice faltered. "But I was just trying to make conversation." "You provided him with the necessary information," Colin stated flatly. "School location, routine, and then your son became vulnerable." I felt something within me fracture, not metaphorically but physically, as if my heart had splintered open and a torrent of emotions I was meant to feel poured out of me all at once. Rage, grief, betrayal, helplessness. "Why are you here?" I asked Colin. "How did you even know about Marcus?" I've been tracking Voss for 3 years. I have alerts configured for his name, his known associates, any crimes that conform to his pattern. When I heard about a child attacked near Middleton Park by someone matching his description, I knew. And I came because I knew the police wouldn't connect all the dots quickly enough. Voss is meticulous. He plans. And if he attacked your son, there's a reason.
There's always a reason. The reason is my wife, I said bitterly. Partially, Cullen acknowledged, but I don't believe that's the complete narrative. I think Voss utilized your wife to gain proximity to your family. The question is, why your family specifically? I gazed at him. What do you mean? Cullen rose and walked to the window. He stared out at the city for a prolonged moment before turning to face us. I have dedicated 3 years to researching Voss. I understand his patterns. I comprehend his thought processes. And I know that he doesn't select targets at random. He picks them because he believes they owe him something, that they've wronged him or his family in some way. Cullen's eyes locked onto mine. So my question for you, Mr. Graves, is this. What did you do to him? I've never met him. I don't know who he is. Perhaps not directly, Cullen remarked, but indirectly, through your work, through something in your past. I shook my head. I manage a hardware store. I go home. I lead a normal life. Cullen scrutinized me for an extended moment, then nodded slowly. Okay, then we need to discover another connection. He turned to Eliza. Did Voss ever discuss his family, about why he was angry? Did they ever mention anyone else's name? Eliza pondered deeply. He mentioned his brother and his brother's wife. He said she died. He said it was because of the system, because people didn't care enough to prevent bad things from happening. That's not the full account, Cullen said quietly. His brother was a criminal, a serious one, and his wife, she made a choice. But Voss doesn't perceive it that way. He sees it as people betraying him. The room fell silent, save for the steady beeping of Marcus's monitors. There's something you're not disclosing to us, I said to Cullen. Something about why you're genuinely here, why you're so deeply invested in this case. Cullen's jaw clenched. He reached down and suddenly lifted his shirt, revealing a jagged scar that cut across his ribs. When Voss attacked me 3 years ago, he didn't merely attempt to injure me. He sought to destroy me. He fractured 3 of my ribs, broke my skull, and left me for dead in that parking garage. I spent 6 months in recovery, 6 months contemplating who could harbor such intense hatred for me. He lowered his shirt. And then I began investigating. I uncovered information about his brother, about the trial, about the testimony that sent him to prison. And I realized Voss was blaming me for something I hadn't done. I was simply fulfilling my role as a witness. But you survived, Eliza said. You're here. You recovered. I did, Cullen affirmed. But not everyone does. Some people don't get that second chance. His eyes drifted to Marcus's unconscious form. Your son might not get that second chance. And if Voss isn't stopped, he's going to continue his hunt. He's going to keep destroying families until someone halts him. I felt the profound weight of that statement descend upon my shoulders. This was no longer solely about my family. This was about thwarting a man who had decided that justice equated to revenge on anyone he could reach. What do we do? I asked. First, you tell the police everything, Cullen said, looking at Eliza. Everything about your relationship with Voss, everything he said, everything he did. We construct a case that extends beyond just the physical assault on your son. And then? I asked. And then, Cullen said, turning to face me directly, we ensure he never harms anyone else again. But first, we need to comprehend why he chose your family. Because I don't believe in coincidence, and neither does Adrian Voss. Your name surfaced in a legal database. I don't know how yet, but it did. When I cross-referenced your background with Voss's known resentments, your name appeared. We need to ascertain why.
Collins was a different caliber of officer than the one I had spoken to earlier. This one arrived with an already prepared file folder. As Collins settled into the seat across from me in the hospital cafeteria, a comfortable distance from Eliza and Marcus's room, he presented a folder. "I've been speaking with Adrian Voss's cellmate from 2 years ago," Collins stated without preamble. Voss had spent 8 months in county lockup on an assault charge that never stuck. During his time inside, he frequently discussed his grievances. His cellmate had meticulously documented some of these conversations. "I waited. Your name surfaced," Collins continued, "though not in connection with anything you personally did. It was linked to someone else, someone named Hunter Graves." My stomach clenched. "My brother, your brother, he passed away 5 years ago." "Correct, yes, a car accident." Collins opened the folder, pushing a photograph across the table. It was a police report from 7 years prior. The headline read, "Drunk driving arrest. Hunter Graves, age 24, blood alcohol level 0.18. Your brother was apprehended for driving under the influence," Collins explained. He mentioned Hunter was returning home from a bar called the Midnight Room. "Do you know that establishment?" I remained silent, no response necessary. The memory surged forth. Hunter's 2 a.m. call, pleading for a ride, too intoxicated to drive. My refusal, my insistence he call a cab or sleep it off in his car. My 100th wave of anger at him for his repetitive mistakes. "The arresting officer," Collins went on, "was named Marcus Voss, Adrian's older brother, the very man who later went to prison for trafficking." The room briefly stabilized, then spun with renewed intensity. "Hunter's case was eventually dismissed," Collins clarified. "No conviction. Yet that night, Marcus Voss was the one who arrested him. That night, Hunter spent 8 hours in a jail cell. According to Voss's cellmate, Adrian had forever blamed my family for humiliating his brother, for subjecting him to the legal system when he was merely performing his duties as a police officer. Adrian viewed it as the catalyst for all the misfortunes that befell his family. "That's preposterous," I stated. "We weren't the cause of any of that." "Rational individuals comprehend that," Collins remarked. "Irrational individuals with a history of violence perceive things differently. Voss interpreted your brother's rejection of help from a cop he respected as disrespect. He saw his brother entangled in the system and blamed your entire family for not affording his brother sufficient respect." I felt a wave of nausea. My refusal to pick up my inebriated brother 15 years ago had seemingly initiated a chain reaction, culminating in my son lying in an ICU bed. "There's more," Collins revealed, sliding another document my way. 2 weeks before the assault on your son, Voss approached someone at a bar. He inquired about your family, specifically about you, your workplace, and your routine. Who did he approach? A bartender named Violet. She's employed at the Midnight Room, the same bar where your brother was arrested. Everything converged. Every thread led back to that single night 15 years ago when I instructed my brother to manage his own predicament. "So this is my fault," I articulated flatly. "This is Adrian Voss's fault," Collins corrected. "He elected to harm your son. However, grasping the connection is crucial because it illuminates his thought process. It indicates what he's likely to do next." "What do you mean, what he's likely to do next? He's in custody, isn't he? He's been arrested." Collins's hesitation conveyed everything. "We brought him in for questioning, but we lack sufficient evidence to detain him yet. The witness didn't actually observe him committing the assault. They merely saw him near the scene. He maintains he was at the park for an entirely innocent reason. Without additional evidence, without a confession, he walks free." I rose from my chair. "He nearly murdered my son." "I know," Collins murmured, "but the system demands proof. The witness is credible, yet they didn't witness the actual attack. Voss was astute enough to ensure that." Cullen then appeared in the cafeteria doorway as if anticipating this very news, as if he knew Collins's forthcoming words. "He's being released," Collins confirmed to me. not as a question, but as a definitive statement. "Within the hour," Collins added. "His lawyer is aggressively pursuing it now." A subtle shift occurred within me, not a breakdown, but a change, like a door opening to an unfamiliar room within my own being. "What happens to him when he's released?" I inquired. "We'll be monitoring him," Collins assured. "We have surveillance. Officers are watching his apartment, but legally he's free to go unless he does something else," Collins said, fully entering the room. "Unless he makes another mistake."
Unless he attempts to finish what he started. Collins's gaze moved between us. "I disapprove of this trajectory." "No one is heading anywhere," Collins stated calmly. "I'm merely suggesting that sometimes justice is a protracted process. Sometimes it requires time, and sometimes individuals must protect themselves while that process unfolds." After Collins departed, Cullen drew me aside. His scarred countenance remained serene, but his eyes held a familiar, burning intensity. Purpose, focused, deliberate purpose. "Your son did not deserve this," Cullen asserted, "and you did not cause this, regardless of your personal convictions. But now you face a choice. You can allow the system to handle it and hope for the best, or you can permit me to assist you in ensuring that Adrian Voss never harms another child." "What does that imply?" I asked, though I already understood the answer. "It implies," Cullen replied, "that some individuals only comprehend one language, and I am fluent in it." Cullen never explicitly divulged his plans. It wasn't his modus operandi. Instead, he posed specific questions that compelled me to confront topics I had actively avoided. "How long has Eliza been deceiving you?" he inquired as we sat in the hospital corridor while Marcus slept. "Not merely about Voss, about everything, because infidelity doesn't commence with a single conversation. It begins with minor disconnections, subtle resentments, small secrets." I paused before answering, mentally replaying the past 6 months. Her late nights at the gym, the new wardrobe, her compulsive phone checking, her frequent emotional distance, as if her thoughts resided elsewhere. "Longer than she admitted," I finally conceded. "And her involvement with Voss, do you believe it was purely physical, or was there something more?" "I no longer know. I don't know what to believe." Colin nodded, as if this was the expected response. "People are rarely who we perceive them to be, and those closest to us are the most adept at concealing their true selves." He retrieved his phone, displaying a series of photographs, Adrian Voss in various urban locations, Voss at a coffee shop, Voss at a gas station, Voss outside a building I instantly recognized. "That's my residence," I declared. "That's Adrian Voss conducting reconnaissance on your family," Colin corrected. "These were taken 4 months ago, prior to his meeting Eliza at the gym, before the affair commenced." "I believe Voss initially identified your family, then meticulously orchestrated the relationship with your wife. He leveraged her to draw closer, to grasp your routines, to pinpoint the opportune moment to strike at Marcus." The ramifications struck me like a physical blow. Eliza hadn't been seduced by Voss. She had been selected, exploited, manipulated into becoming an instrument in his scheme of revenge. "So she's a victim too?" I stammered, the words feeling foreign on my tongue. "Victims and perpetrators are not always easily distinguishable," Colin observed. "She made choices, poor choices, choices that jeopardized your son. But yes, she was also being manipulated by a predator. That doesn't absolve her responsibility, but it clarifies the mechanics of how this transpired." A nurse passed us in the hallway. Cullen waited until she was out of earshot before continuing. "There's something else I discovered," he said quietly. "Regarding Voss's brother, Marcus, the police officer who arrested your brother." "What about him?" "He didn't merely go to prison for trafficking. The case was connected to something larger, a criminal ring operating out of the ports. Federal involvement. Your brother's arrest report, it was linked to an investigation that ultimately dismantled Marcus Voss's entire operation." "How is my brother connected to that?" "He wasn't, not directly, but the arresting officer filed a report that night, your brother's DUI arrest.
That report entered the system, and that report eventually captured the attention of federal investigators probing Marcus Voss's connections.
The timeline suggests that your brother's arrest, filed by Marcus Voss himself, ultimately precipitated the investigation that ruined his career. I absorbed the weight of that revelation. My refusal to pick up my inebriated brother, the subsequent arrest, a report filed by a police officer, an investigation that unraveled an entire criminal enterprise. So Adrian blames us for his brother's downfall, I mused. He blames you for not respecting his brother enough to refuse the arrest, Colin clarified. He interprets it as your disrespect for the badge, disrespect for the law, disrespect for him. And in his warped perception, that disrespect caused everything that subsequently occurred. That's utterly irrational. Of course it is, Colin agreed. But irrational individuals with access to violence are considerably more perilous than rational ones. They don't adhere to predictable patterns. They don't respond to logic. My phone buzzed, a text from Eliza. Lawyer wants to talk. Need you upstairs. I showed Colin the message. He read it, then slowly stood. Your wife will require legal counsel. She will face questions concerning her involvement with Voss. She might face charges for failing to report a threat. Things are going to become complicated for her, for your family. What do you suggest? I suggest you concentrate on your son, on his recovery. And I suggest you cease contemplating revenge and begin contemplating justice. Is there a distinction? Colin gazed at me for an extended moment. Revenge is what you desire. Justice is what the system promises. Upon reaching the upper floor, I discovered Eliza engaged in conversation with a lawyer named Preston, a man in his mid-50s, impeccably dressed in an expensive suit. His calm demeanor exuded the quiet confidence of someone who had defended individuals across every conceivable circumstance. Your wife finds herself in a rather complex predicament, Preston began, foregoing any pleasantries. She was in contact with an identified aggressor and neglected to report a specific threat. However, there is no direct evidence linking her to the actual assault, no phone records indicating coordinated action, no financial transactions. While her presence at the park raises suspicion, it is not in itself a criminal act. So she won't be charged? I inquired. Not unless new evidence surfaces, Preston affirmed. But there's an additional complication. Adrian Voss is scheduled for release within the hour. The prosecutor's office is concerned he might view Eliza as a vulnerability, someone who could testify against him, someone privy to his movements, his plans, his motivations. You believe he'll target her? I pressed. I believe we must prepare for that eventuality, Preston responded. Therefore, I am recommending that your family be placed under protective custody, at least temporarily, until we fully grasp the scope of this situation and until Voss is addressed through appropriate legal channels. I glanced at Eliza, who appeared smaller, more diminished and frightened than I had ever witnessed her. I will make the arrangements, Preston declared, rising. You will need to pack essentials. You will be relocated to a secure facility. Your son will remain here under police protection until he is stable enough for relocation. As Preston departed to make arrangements, Eliza reached out, grasping my hand. I truly didn't know, she whispered. I was unaware of any of this. I didn't know Voss was manipulating me. I was oblivious to your brother's arrest. I had no idea that meeting him at the gym was part of some grander scheme. I remained silent, simply holding her hand, not out of forgiveness, but because in that moment, we were both victims of something we scarcely comprehended. Colin reappeared in the doorway. There's been a development, he stated in a hushed tone. Voss didn't wait for his release. He walked out an hour ago. Apparently, his lawyer convinced the DA that there was insufficient evidence to detain him. He's currently at large, and there's no surveillance because he moved more swiftly than anticipated. A chill permeated the room. Where is he? I asked. That, Collins replied, is the question everyone is asking. The police are searching for him, but I suspect he has a single objective in mind, and it's not to simply vanish.
The safe house was a rented property in a tranquil neighborhood 40 minutes outside the city. It was an unassuming, single-story residence, the kind of place easily forgotten the moment one drove past it. A uniformed officer occupied an unmarked car outside, while another conducted sweeps of the interior every 6 hours for surveillance equipment. Preston had orchestrated everything with the efficiency of someone who had navigated such situations countless times before. Eliza packed a bag, and I followed suit. We were escorted in separate vehicles to complicate any potential pursuit, a standard protocol for witness protection, Preston explained. Although Eliza wasn't technically a witness, her situation was considerably more intricate. The following morning, news broke. Man released in assault case disappears from custody. The headline implied Voss had inexplicably vanished, but Colin knew better. He arrived at the safe house that evening, bringing information the police had yet to publicize. Voss went to his apartment, gathered some belongings, and then departed, Collins stated, seated at the kitchen table while an officer stood discreetly in the corner. But before he left, he made 3 phone calls, all to untraceable burner phones, each lasting less than 30 seconds. He was sending messages, signals. To whom? I inquired. That's what we're endeavoring to ascertain. Voss doesn't operate in isolation. He has contacts, individuals he trusts, individuals who might be assisting him. Detective Collins arrived an hour later, carrying search warrant documentation and a somber expression. He placed a folder on the table before me. We discovered something at Voss's apartment, Collins revealed. Photographs of your family, hundreds of them, dating back months. Your son at school, your son at soccer practice, you at work, your wife at the gym, at the grocery store, at restaurants. He was meticulously documenting everything. I opened the folder and my stomach churned. The images were systematic, almost clinical. Voss had not been acting on impulse or emotion. He had been conducting surveillance with the precision of a military operation. There's something else, Collins continued. We found correspondence, emails to someone named Morgan. We've been attempting to identify her, but she's careful. She utilizes encrypted messaging, VPNs, the usual precautions, but the content is damning. He handed me printed emails. Voss to Morgan. The setup is complete. Once I'm through with the kid, he'll fully grasp what loss entails. Then we move to the next phase. Morgan's response: don't become complacent. The timeline is crucial. Once the father understands, everything must progress swiftly. What is the next phase? I managed to ask, my voice barely a whisper. We don't know, Collins admitted. That's what we're trying to determine. But it's clear that the attack on your son was not the ultimate objective. It was merely the beginning. Colin, who had been silently studying the photographs, now looked up with an intensity that seemed to constrict the room around us. Morgan is not an outsider, Colin stated quietly. Morgan is someone with access to information about your family, someone who comprehends your routines, your vulnerabilities, someone close enough to assist in planning this. That's impossible, I asserted. I don't know anyone named Morgan. But your wife might, Collins suggested, turning to Eliza. She stood near the window, her face pallid, shaking her head slowly. I don't personally know anyone named Morgan, but... She trailed off, her hands trembling. Adrian mentioned a friend once. He said her name was Morgan. I assumed she was just someone he knew from before. I never met her. I never inquired about her. What else did he say about her? Collins pressed. That she understood him, that she too had been wronged by the system, that she was helping him with something important. Eliza's voice cracked. I thought he meant helping him get over me. I thought she was just part of his support system. Colin and Collins exchanged a look that conveyed entire conversations without words. We need to locate Morgan, Collins declared, standing. She holds the key to understanding what comes next. The investigation shifted course thereafter. Police scrutinized financial records, traced phone numbers, and interviewed everyone Adrian Voss had ever known. The emerging picture was fragmented but terrifying. Morgan was real. Morgan was connected.
Morgan had been harmed by the system, having lost custody of her children due to testimony provided by a police officer during a domestic violence case. The officer's name appeared in multiple case files, one of which was linked to Marcus Voss's arrest record. Another connection, another thread leading back to the same source. She blames the system for taking her children, a young detective named Paige explained during a briefing. And she's been seeking ways to make people pay. When she met Adrian Voss online through a support group for individuals with criminal histories, they bonded over their shared anger, their shared desire for a justice the system never provided. "So this is a conspiracy?" I asked. "They planned to harm my son together?" "We believe they planned something larger," Paige clarified. "The attack on Marcus was step 1, but we are still trying to determine what step 2 was intended to be." Colin abruptly rose and walked to the wall where police had meticulously pinned photographs and connected them with red string, forming a visual map of the conspiracy. "Step 2 is you," Colin stated, pointing at me. "Step 2 is ensuring the father understands loss in the same way Adrian Voss understands it. Step 2 is the destruction of your entire world, just as he feels his world was destroyed." "What does that entail?" I inquired. "It means," Colin explained slowly, "that if they succeed, you won't just lose your son, you'll lose everything else as well." Before anyone could respond, Colin's phone vibrated. He read the message, and a subtle shift occurred in his expression, determination solidifying into action. "They found something," he announced, "at Morgan's last known address. Financial records showing wire transfers to Adrian Voss. And something else. A detailed plan with names, with dates, with targets." "Targets?" My voice trembled. "Multiple individuals," Collins confirmed, looking directly at me. "People connected to cases that went against Morgan or Voss. People whose lives they decided deserved to be obliterated. Your family is number 3 on the list." "Who are numbers 1 and 2? Eliza pressed. Colin did not reply immediately, his gaze fixed on the list, his scarred face as unyielding as stone. "Numbers 1 and 2 are already dead," he finally revealed. "A murder-suicide occurred 3 months ago. Police ruled it domestic violence. But we suspect Voss was involved. We believe he helped orchestrate it. And now that we are aware of this list, we must assume that everyone else on it is in immediate peril." The room fell silent, save for the faint crackle of the officer's radio outside. "You need to present this to the courts," I urged Collins. "You need to arrest Morgan and Voss before they harm anyone else." "We are working on it," Collins assured me. "But warrants require time. Evidence must be irrefutable. And currently, Morgan has also vanished. She has gone underground, as has Voss. We are searching, but it's as if they have evaporated." Colin moved towards the door. "Where are you going?" I asked. "To do what the police cannot," he stated. "To find them before they find you." And with that, he was gone. Precisely 48 hours later, the arrest occurred. Adrian Voss was apprehended at a commercial storage facility on the city's outskirts, raided by police at dawn with full tactical gear. Inside, authorities uncovered city maps with marked addresses, photographs, weaponry, and a comprehensive journal detailing every stage of his scheme. Yet it wasn't the police who located him. It was Colin. The following morning, when Detective Collins briefed me, his tone conveyed an assumption that I had already determined what to believe. Collins explained, settling across from me at the safe house kitchen table. I remained silent, already certain of the identity of that mysterious person. Collins continued. "Nothing life-threatening and nothing that will appear on an official report. But he's been systematically beaten. Someone wanted information from him, and they got it." "What information?" I inquired. "Where Morgan is hidden, the complete list of targets, the full scope of their operation." Voss divulged everything. Names, locations, the works. The trial commenced 6 weeks later.
By then, Marcus had been discharged from the ICU, his lung fully healed, and the brain swelling significantly reduced. Doctors confirmed a complete physical recovery, though they harbored uncertainty regarding the psychological repercussions of his ordeal. The courtroom was a stark, formal space. Voss sat in an orange jumpsuit, his face bruised, but his expression defiant. The prosecutor, a woman named Tessa, who never once smiled during the entire trial, presented the evidence meticulously. The photographs, the surveillance, the emails exchanged with Morgan, the financial transactions, and Voss's personal journal, where he had meticulously documented each step of his revenge plot with the precision of an architect. Voss's lawyer, a perpetually exhausted public defender named Felix, endeavored to introduce reasonable doubt. He posited that the evidence was circumstantial, asserting that his client was disturbed but not a criminal. He argued that Voss had acted out of grief, not malice. His efforts proved futile. The jury deliberated for 6 hours, returning with a unanimous verdict: guilty of aggravated assault, guilty of conspiracy, and guilty of attempted murder. The judge, an older man with steel-gray hair and eyes that had witnessed every human depravity, sentenced Voss to 25 years. "You sought to destroy a family," the judge pronounced, his voice resonating through the courtroom. "You attempted to murder a child. You conspired with others to inflict suffering and pain. The court finds no mitigating circumstances that would lessen your culpability. You will serve a sentence of 25 years in a state penitentiary with no possibility of parole for a minimum of 15 years. Voss remained impassive, staring straight ahead as if the sentence were being delivered to someone else in another room. However, Morgan was never found. Despite the information Voss provided, despite extensive searches and surveillance, Morgan vanished completely. Her apartment was empty, her job abandoned, and her car was discovered in an airport parking garage, but she herself remained elusive. "She's gone," Colin stated when he visited after the verdict. We were in Marcus's hospital room. My son slept peacefully, his breathing steady and natural, no longer reliant on mechanical assistance. She had contingency plans. She knew that if things went awry, she'd need to disappear. Voss couldn't give us any leads to her because she never entrusted him with that information. "So she just gets away with it?" I pressed. "For now," Colin replied. "But people like Morgan don't stay hidden forever. They eventually resurface. They eventually make a mistake. And when she does, we'll be waiting." "We?" I questioned. "I thought you were finished with this." Colin's scarred face turned towards me, his gray eyes intense but weary. "I'll never be done with this," he said quietly. 3 years ago, Adrian Voss attacked me. I believed that was the end of his story. It turns out I was the beginning. I was the connection that led to everything else. Your family, your son, all of it traces back to me being his first victim. "That's not your fault," I asserted. "Perhaps not, but it is my responsibility." Colin rose and looked down at a sleeping Marcus. "There are more people like Voss out there, more people who have decided that justice means revenge, more people who are going to hurt innocent people because the system failed them at some point. And someone needs to ensure they don't." After Colin departed, I sat alone with my sleeping son, contemplating all that had transpired. The investigation had unveiled so much about my own family that I had never known. About Eliza's unhappiness, my own detachment from those closest to me, how swiftly a normal life could shatter when one wasn't paying attention. The hospital released Marcus 3 weeks later. He walked out slowly, still favoring his left side where his ribs were mending. He spoke little about what had occurred. The therapist explained it as normal, post-traumatic stress manifesting as silence. Eliza had agreed to temporarily move back in. The lawyer had advised it for Marcus's sake, for stability, for the appearance of a united family front. But everyone understood it was temporary. Our marriage had been built on a foundation of small lies and smaller disconnections. The affair had merely been the breaking point, not the root cause. One evening, about a month after Marcus returned home, Detective Collins called me. "We found Morgan," he stated without preamble. "Where?" My heart rate spiked. "Canada. She had crossed the border 3 days after Voss's arrest. She was living under an assumed name in Vancouver, but she made a mistake. She tried to access her bank account from an unsecured location. We traced it." "Is she being extradited?" "That's the complicated part," Collins explained. "The Canadian authorities brought her in for questioning, and she's confessed to everything, but not here. She's going to trial in Canada for her crimes there. Apparently, she wasn't just working with Voss. She had her own operation going, her own victims, her own revenge plot extending beyond what we knew." "How many victims?" I asked. 3 in the United States. We're still counting how many in Canada." After hanging up, I walked into Marcus's room. He was awake, staring at the ceiling with the blank expression that had become his default. "Hey, buddy," I said, sitting on the edge of his bed. "How are you feeling?" "Fine," he replied, his usual answer. "Do you want to talk about anything?" He remained silent for a long moment. Then, "Why did that man hurt me?" I had dreaded this question, hoping it wouldn't arise, but I knew it would eventually. Because a long time ago, something terrible happened to his family, and instead of finding real justice, he decided to hurt innocent people instead. He decided you were the one to hurt. "That's not fair," Marcus stated. "No," I agreed. "It's not fair, and I'm sorry I couldn't protect you from that." Marcus turned to look at me then, truly look at me. His eyes were older than they should have been, harder. "It wasn't your fault. It wasn't anyone's fault. It just happened." In that moment, I realized my son had already comprehended something that took most people years to learn. That sometimes terrible things happen, that sometimes there's no logic to it, that sometimes you just have to survive it and figure out how to move forward. And that maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The court case against Morgan in Canada ignited a media sensation. Every intricate detail was dissected by news outlets across North America. The conspiracy, the meticulous planning, the target list, and crucially, the question everyone yearned to have answered. Why? Morgan agreed to a plea bargain, life without parole, in exchange for a complete testimony about her operation and her partnership with Adrian Voss. In her courtroom statement, she unveiled details that reshaped our understanding of everything that had occurred. "I lost my children because the system failed to protect me," Morgan declared, her voice cold and measured. "A police officer testified that I was an unfit mother. That officer was connected to a case that involved Adrian Voss's brother. When I met Adrian online, I realized we shared a common enemy, the system that destroyed us both. So we decided to make the system understand what it felt like to be destroyed." The prosecutor inquired, "How many people were on your target list?" 7, Morgan replied. "We'd completed 2. Adrian was working on the 3rd. If we had succeeded with all 7, we would have then moved to the people we blamed most directly, the judges, the lawyers, the officers who testified against us. It was terrorism disguised as personal revenge, a conspiracy cloaked in the guise of justice." Cullen watched the trial footage from the safe house, his expression unchanging. He had been visiting regularly since Voss's conviction, never staying long, always bringing information that helped me grasp the broader context of what had transpired. "There are more like them," Cullen observed one afternoon while Marcus was at physical therapy. "People who have decided that the system failed them and now they're taking justice into their own hands. Some are organized, some are acting independently, but they all operate on the same principle: make someone else suffer because they suffered." "How do you stop them?" I asked. "You don't," Cullen said flatly. "You can't stop human nature. You can only prepare for it. You can only make sure that when it happens, you're ready to respond." Eliza had moved out 2 weeks after Marcus returned home. The lawyers had meticulously prepared the separation documents, signaling that the divorce would be finalized within 6 months. Far from being the dramatic or agonizing process I had anticipated, it simply felt inevitable. It was the natural outcome for two individuals who had lost faith in each other and in the very foundation of their life together.
The affair, it turned out, was merely a symptom, not the underlying disease. However, an unexpected development arose during the legal proceedings. Eliza's attorney contacted me with a surprising proposition. "Your wife wishes to establish a fund," her lawyer explained, "dedicated to victims of targeted violence, those whose families have been shattered by revenge plots akin to her own experience." He added that she was prepared to allocate a substantial portion of her divorce settlement to this cause. I arranged to meet with Eliza at a coffee shop conveniently located near her new apartment. She appeared somewhat altered, smaller in stature, yet radiating an undeniable inner strength, as if shedding a tremendous burden had unveiled her resilience. "I need to take action," she stated without preamble. "I must try to atone for what I enabled, for the consequences my choices helped bring about. This fund isn't about seeking forgiveness, it's about embracing responsibility." For 2 hours, we delved into her therapeutic journey, her evolving comprehension of how she had been manipulated, her lingering guilt concerning Marcus, and her earnest endeavors to reconstruct her life while confronting the destruction she had inadvertently caused. "I will support this fund," I assured her, "and I will assist in any way I can." A visible sense of relief washed over her face, not the relief of being forgiven, but that of feeling less isolated in bearing the immense weight of the past. The subsequent investigation into Morgan's Canadian operations unveiled additional victims, entirely unknown to us previously. These were families whose lives had been cruelly targeted, individuals whose existence had been irrevocably scarred, simply because Morgan perceived them as embodying the very system that had deprived her of her children. Among these victims was a man named Dominic, a dedicated social worker whose report had ultimately led to Morgan losing custody. Upon discovering his presence on Morgan's target list, Detective Collins reached out to him, informing him about the Safe House Fund that Eliza was initiating. "I want to be involved in this," Dominic declared when we finally met. "I want to extend help to others enduring similar hardships. I want to convey the message that revenge offers no healing. It merely deepens the wound." And so the fund gradually transformed into a movement. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, individuals began to step forward. People profoundly affected by revenge plots, those who had tragically lost family members to violence, fueled by perceived injustice. These were individuals driven by a desire to channel their pain into something constructive rather than perpetuating it. Marcus, in particular, began to engage with some of these individuals. His therapist had advised against discussing his own trauma, so he instead concentrated on recovery, on moving forward, and on discovering meaning in the aftermath of violence. "I did nothing to that man," Marcus would simply state. "I wasn't the cause of his pain, yet I was hurt because of it. Now I have a choice concerning what to do with that hurt. I can use it to understand the suffering of others, or I can use it to inflict pain back. I choose the former." It was, as the saying goes, out of the mouths of babes. My 12-year-old son had, in his innocence, stumbled upon a profound wisdom that often eludes most adults for decades. Colin attended one of the fund's inaugural events, a community gathering specifically for victims of targeted violence. He positioned himself at the rear of the room, observing as people shared their poignant stories. His scarred face remained inscrutable, yet a subtle shift in his posture was discernible. The rigid tension that had defined his demeanor for months had slightly abated. Following the event, he drew me aside. "You are engaged in something profoundly significant here," he remarked. "You are disrupting the cycle, cultivating an environment where people can heal rather than seeking retribution. That holds immense importance. We owe it to those who have suffered." "Indeed," I responded. "We owe it to those like Morgan and Voss, who failed to discover an alternative path." Colin nodded slowly. "For 3 years, I pursued Adrian Voss relentlessly. I was as consumed by revenge as he was by his. though I cloaked mine in a different guise of justice. He paused, his gaze drifting. Perhaps this is what genuine healing truly entails. Not victory, not revenge, but simply acknowledging the pain and striving to prevent its recurrence in others. Before his departure that evening, Colin handed me an envelope. Inside lay a transfer document for a substantial sum of money, an anonymous donation to the fund, devoid of any name or contact information. Many individuals have been shattered by the system, Collins had once commented. Some of us simply opt to take action without causing further destruction in the process. Detective Collins received a promotion to lieutenant, a recognition of his successful resolution of the Voss-Morgan conspiracy case. One of his initial acts in his new role was to establish a specialized unit dedicated to revenge-motivated crimes. He subsequently reached out to me regarding a consulting position. You possess a deeper understanding of this than most, Collins noted. You have endured it and emerged without succumbing to its corrosive influence. That is a rare quality. I began consulting with the unit part-time, concurrently maintaining my position at the hardware store. Marcus continued his arduous recovery. School proved challenging. Other children, having learned of the attack, treated him differently. Yet he slowly adjusted, and gradually he came to understand that what had transpired was not a defining event, but merely one moment, one terrible moment in a long life that would encompass countless other experiences. Approximately 8 months after Marcus returned home from the hospital, Eliza called me with startling news. They found Morgan again, she announced. She escaped from the Canadian facility. Somehow she got out and vanished. The news struck me hard. We had believed it was finally over, that we could at last move forward. But Colin was already on it. I received a text from him. Don't worry, some hunts don't end. They just enter a new phase. It was then that I realized, for some individuals, the unwavering commitment to ensuring no one else became a victim was a lifelong endeavor. The news of Morgan's escape sent shockwaves through everyone. Victims' families inundated the fund with calls, while volunteers expressed palpable fear. The media plastered headlines across newspapers detailing prison security failures and dangerous inmates slipping through the cracks. For 3 agonizing days, we existed in that liminal space between tentative safety and sheer terror. Then, Colin contacted me with information that radically altered everything. Morgan didn't escape, he stated flatly. She was released, an early release program. He elaborated that she had seemingly demonstrated good behavior in prison and her lawyer had successfully argued for her potential rehabilitation. The Canadian authorities had set her free. That's utterly insane, I retorted. She's a documented conspirator in multiple murders. Welcome to the justice system, Collins rejoined bitterly, where punishment is optional if you possess the right attorney and sufficient time elapses for public memory to fade. However, what followed was the true shock. Morgan had not disappeared into the sprawling Canadian landscape. She had returned to the United States. More specifically, she had returned to our very city. Detective Collins was the one to inform me. He arrived at my home accompanied by Lieutenant Page, and the instant I witnessed their expressions, I knew an irrevocable shift had occurred. Morgan was sighted at the airport 3 days ago, Collins informed me. She utilized a fake passport and successfully navigated security. We're uncertain how long she's been back, but we've been monitoring her movements since the sighting. Where is she? I demanded, my hands already beginning to tremble. That's the complicated aspect, Page replied. She's been holding meetings with various individuals, coordinating something. We've traced her to a warehouse in the industrial district. We believe she's actively reconstituting her operation. You need to arrest her, I insisted. We're attempting to, Collins responded. But we require solid evidence that she has committed a new crime. Being in the country illegally under an assumed name isn't sufficient to detain her long term. We need to apprehend her in the act. We need to conclusively prove she's engaged in conspiracy or actively planning violence. Colin arrived within the hour,
He listened intently to everything Collins had relayed to me. And then he did something I had never before witnessed. He smiled. Not a joyful smile, but a predatory one.
"She came back," Colin uttered quietly. "She actually came back. That's a mistake. That's the mistake I've been anticipating." "What do you mean?" I inquired. "I mean," Colin elaborated, "that Morgan has committed a critical error. Individuals like her, driven by revenge, they cannot stay away, they cannot let go. They incessantly circle the same wounds, striving to make them bleed just one more time. And eventually, they bleed themselves to death." Over the ensuing week, surveillance on Morgan intensified dramatically. She was observed meeting with people Colin recognized, individuals with criminal backgrounds, people possessing specialized skills. She was evidently reconstructing something inherently perilous. But then, the investigation took an unexpected turn. One of Morgan's associates, a man named Ryder, was arrested on an unrelated drug charge. During interrogation, he offered crucial information in exchange for a plea deal. "Morgan is orchestrating something monumental," Ryder divulged to Detective Collins. "She's targeting multiple individuals, people she blames for her children being removed, but also individuals connected to Voss. She's attempting to avenge him while simultaneously pursuing her own vendetta. She's coordinating with people still within the prison system, individuals willing to assist her in creating widespread chaos." "How many people is she targeting?" Collins pressed. "I don't know the precise number, but it includes the social worker who testified against her, the judge who ruled against her in custody court, "And also," Ryder hesitated, "also you," he said, directing his gaze at me. "She intends to finish what Voss initiated. She wants to ensure your family never truly recovers." The safe house was reactivated, its necessity beyond dispute this time. Marcus, Eliza, and I were immediately placed under protective custody while the investigation proceeded. Yet Colin adopted a different approach this time. Instead of vanishing to hunt on his own, he remained conspicuously present. He collaborated closely with Collins and the detective unit. He aided them in deciphering Morgan's intricate psychology. He helped them anticipate her every move. "She's going to make her move soon," Colin declared during a briefing at the police station. "She's impatient. She had been in seclusion for far too long, yearning for affirmation and seeking to validate her belief that the prevailing system could be challenged and overcome. Her primary aim was to demonstrate the feasibility of retaliation. 3 days thereafter, Morgan initiated her meticulously planned operation. She proceeded to the courthouse, entering the edifice during regular business hours. Security footage distinctly captured her purposeful passage through the corridors. She carried a package, a backpack, intended for delivery to Judge Nathaniel's office. However, Colin awaited her presence, not within the office, but in the hallway adjacent to the judge's chambers. The ensuing events became the focal point of intense scrutiny, with various witnesses offering divergent accounts. Nevertheless, the officially accepted narrative stated that Colin confronted Morgan, who then attempted to flee. A struggle ensued, and Colin restrained her until security personnel arrived. Yet, the unofficial version, the one later imparted to me by Colin, diverged significantly. "I offered her a choice," Colin recounted, seated in the police precinct's visitation room. Inquiring about her decision, I asked. Colin responded, "Morgan was subsequently apprehended and held without bail, pending federal charges encompassing conspiracy, illegal border crossing, and violation of parole conditions." Crucially, the contents of her backpack were examined, revealing materials consistent with an explosive device. The federal prosecutor personally handled the case, which dominated headlines for weeks. During the trial, Morgan's testimony laid bare the full extent of her intricate scheme. She had been collaborating with individuals within the correctional system, devising simultaneous attacks on multiple targets. Her intention was to ignite a wave of civil unrest, thereby exposing what she perceived as systemic failings and corruption. "I aimed to make them understand," Morgan declared from the witness stand, her voice unwavering and unemotional.
I wanted them to experience the profound loss of everything, to feel the system's betrayal, to endure helplessness as their children were forcibly removed. And I sought to demonstrate that vengeance is attainable, that justice need not exclusively emanate from the courts. The presiding judge, a different magistrate who had not been a target of her plot, sentenced her to life imprisonment without parole, augmented by an additional 40 years for the attempted bombing. "You endeavored to destroy innocent lives," the judge pronounced, his voice resonating throughout the courtroom. "You sought to instigate terrorism in the guise of personal justice. The court finds that you pose an ongoing menace to public safety and therefore decrees your incarceration for the remainder of your natural life." Morgan exhibited no reaction, merely nodding, as if the outcome had been precisely as anticipated. Following the verdict, Colin and I met one final time at the same coffee shop where I had conversed with Eliza months prior, the very establishment where numerous discussions had transpired, profoundly shaping the trajectory of this entire ordeal. "It's over," I stated, not as a query. "This particular chapter is over," Colin corrected. "But there will always be other Vosses, other Morgans, individuals who have been shattered by the system and choose to inflict harm upon others in retaliation. The pursuit never truly concludes. It merely adopts different manifestations." "Are you going to continue the hunt?" I inquired. Colin gazed out the window, observing the city beyond. "I'm going to do what I should have done from the outset. I'm going to cease being a victim and commence being a protector. Not through revenge, not through violence, but through unwavering vigilance, through comprehending the mindset of individuals like Morgan and Voss, through facilitating the system's improved functionality so that fewer people are broken in the first place." As he rose to depart, a sudden realization struck me. "I never thanked you," I said, "for everything you did, for safeguarding my family." Colin paused at the doorway. "One does not express gratitude to someone for fulfilling their inherent purpose. One merely acknowledges it and moves forward." After his departure, I remained alone with my coffee, contemplating the entirety of the preceding events. I reflected on my brother's drunk driving arrest 15 years ago, on Eliza's infidelity, on Adrian Voss and his profound sorrow, on Morgan and her stolen children, on my son lying in a hospital bed, nearly perishing for offenses he never committed. And I pondered the profound fragility of existence, how swiftly a normal life can disintegrate, how a singular decision, a specific moment, an isolated connection, can spiral outward and obliterate everything. However, I also contemplated recovery, forward progression, the fund we had established, the community we had forged around shared trauma, Marcus's inherent strength, Eliza's acceptance of responsibility, and Colin's profound transformation from hunter to protector. Sometimes, I concluded, that is more than enough. 2 years had elapsed since Marcus was discharged from the hospital. 2 years of arduous rebuilding. 2 years of learning that healing is not a linear process, but rather a spiraling journey that revisits the same emotional landscapes, yet from a perpetually evolving perspective. Marcus, now 14, exhibited increased height and enhanced strength. His physical scars had receded to faint white lines, visible only under specific lighting conditions. His emotional scars were more challenging to discern, yet his therapist affirmed his genuine progress. He still experienced occasional nightmares and moments when sudden loud noises caused him to flinch. Nevertheless, he was once again laughing, playing soccer, and truly living. The Betrayal and Justice Fund had expanded beyond Eliza's or my wildest imaginings. We had broadened our operations to 3 states, assisting 47 families. We had collaborated with law enforcement agencies to identify and preempt 3 additional revenge-motivated conspiracies before they escalated into violence. The work was ceaseless, the demand boundless, but we were undeniably making a tangible impact. Eliza had remarried, finding a good man named Oliver who understood her past and refrained from judging her for her earlier transgressions. Her happiness felt authentic, not merely performative. Our relationship had morphed into something unforeseen. Not friends, but certainly not adversaries.
We had become partners in the shared endeavor of healing, and that, unequivocally, was sufficient. Colin had officially retired from law enforcement. He had established his own consulting firm, specializing in recognizing patterns of revenge-driven violence and assisting organizations in preventing such occurrences. He had also become the fund's unofficial advisor, providing invaluable insights into the psychology of perpetrators and advising on the protection of potential victims. However, a recent development had altered Colin's circumstances last month, bringing him to my residence on a Thursday evening with news that once again shifted the entire paradigm. "Morgan has escaped," he declared without preamble, "from federal prison. She's gone." She had been missing for 10 days before her absence was noted due to a clerical error within the system. My stomach churned. I had believed we were finally finished, that this ordeal was over. "Where?" I managed to ask. "We don't know, but I need you to understand something." Colin settled heavily onto a chair. "Morgan's escape was not haphazard. She received assistance, someone on the inside, someone who risked everything to facilitate her release. And that implies she possesses allies unknown to us, individuals who believe in her cause, people willing to aid her in continuing her work." "What does that signify for us?" I inquired, my thoughts drifting to Marcus upstairs, engrossed in his homework. "It signifies," Colin replied carefully, "that this struggle is far from over. Yet, it also means we are not alone, because we are cultivating something that Morgan and Voss could never achieve. We are building a community, a network of individuals who have been impacted by violence but chose healing over vengeance. And that is far more potent than any conspiracy." The following morning, I woke Marcus early. We sat on the porch, him with coffee, me with hot chocolate, observing the sunrise illuminate our neighborhood. "I need to tell you something," I began. "Something difficult." Marcus listened attentively, without interruption, as I elaborated on Morgan's escape, the unsettling possibility of lingering danger, and the necessity for vigilance without succumbing to fear. When I concluded, Marcus remained silent for a prolonged moment. Then he uttered something that genuinely surprised me. "I'm not scared," he stated. "I mean, I am a little, but not like I was before. I know now that terrible things can happen. But I also know there are people who care enough to protect us. People like Detective Collins and Colin, and you, and Mom. I know I'm not alone in this, and that makes it different." He was absolutely right. That did make all the difference. That evening, I sat down and began to write. Not a diary entry, nor a confession, but a story, the chronicle of what had befallen my family, the narrative of Adrian Voss and Morgan and Colin, and the arduous passage from victim to survivor to protector. I meticulously recorded every detail, every pain, every moment of grace, because a profound realization had dawned upon me. Our story transcended being solely about what had happened to us. It was about what could potentially happen to anyone. It served as both a warning and a guide. It bore witness to the astonishing rapidity with which life can unravel and the painstaking slowness with which it can be rebuilt. I published the story online, openly, under my name, our family's name, our authentic story, devoid of any embellishment. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Messages flooded in from individuals who recognized themselves within the narrative. People who had been victims of revenge, individuals who had been harmed by the system, people striving to navigate their way from trauma to healing. They expressed gratitude for my candor, for not sanitizing the truth, for demonstrating the possibility of survival. One message particularly stood out. It came from a woman named Kendra. "My daughter is in the hospital right now because someone who felt wronged by the system decided to hurt her. I read your story and I realized I'm not alone. I realized that my daughter can survive this, that we can survive this. Thank you for showing me that healing is possible." I shared the message with Marcus. "This," he
he announced, is what you are going to do with your pain. You are going to help other people. You are going to ensure it meant something. 3 months subsequently, Marcus rose to speak at a community event for the fund, recounting his experiences. He focused not on the entirety of his ordeal, but selectively on aspects of recovery, on the process of coexisting with his scars rather than succumbing to them, and on the profound realization that the events he endured were neither his fault nor his defining characteristic. As his narrative concluded, the room, filled with families personally affected by violence, erupted in a standing ovation. In that moment, I observed an expression on Marcus's countenance that had been absent for 2 years, not merely healing, but a palpable sense of purpose, an understanding that his suffering possessed the transformative power to aid others. Following the event, a young man, seemingly no older than 18, approached me. His name was Julian, and he had been a victim of a retaliatory scheme orchestrated by an individual who held his father responsible for a business decision that had adverse repercussions for the perpetrator. Julian declared, "I want to contribute to the fund. I want to engage with other individuals who have experienced harm. I want to convey to them that they are not circumscribed by what transpired." I immediately offered him a position. Over the subsequent months, the fund once again expanded its operations. We welcomed 5 new staff members, all of whom were survivors of revenge-motivated violence. We launched a podcast featuring survivors sharing their personal narratives. Additionally, we developed educational resources for schools and community centers, focusing on the complexities of revenge psychology. Then, 2 weeks ago, an unforeseen development occurred. Morgan was located, not by law enforcement, but by Colin. He arrived at my residence at midnight, bearing news he withheld from the police until the following morning. Colin stated simply, "She is in custody." It transpired that Morgan had established contact with an individual within her network who was, in fact, an undercover law enforcement officer. Believing she was engaging with an ally, she unwittingly walked into an arrest situation. Morgan was subsequently returned to federal prison, with an additional 30 years appended to her sentence for the escape. However, what astonished everyone was the content of her confession during interrogation. She'd been actively endeavoring to organize a network of individuals she perceived as victims of the system. Her aim was to orchestrate a nationwide operation targeting those she blamed for her tribulations. She had been constructing an entity far more extensive and perilous than anyone had comprehended. Federal agents diligently pursued the connections within her network, leading to the apprehension of 12 individuals across 5 states. This intervention successfully thwarted what could have been a coordinated surge of violence. During a press conference, the federal prosecutor stated that this investigation achieved success because one man, Colin Reeves, a retired Navy SEAL, demonstrated the capacity to anticipate Morgan's behavior and remain one step ahead of her. His profound insights into revenge psychology and perpetrator patterns proved invaluable to law enforcement. Colin chose not to attend the press conference. When I inquired about his absence, he responded succinctly, "The work itself holds significance. The recognition does not." Last night, Marcus and I engaged in a discussion about the future, specifically his aspirations for college and his desire to pursue psychology with the intention of assisting trauma survivors. He expressed, "I want to comprehend the motivations behind the choices made by individuals like Morgan and Voss. I want to guide them toward an alternative path before they inflict harm upon others. I aspire to emulate Colin's work, but from a preventative rather than a reactive standpoint." I affirmed, "That is a commendable objective." Marcus corrected me, stating, "It's personal, but I believe that's acceptable. I think the most impactful work stems from understanding one's own suffering and subsequently leveraging that insight to help others circumvent it." He is entirely correct. That is precisely the endeavor all of us have undertaken. All the survivors who have joined the fund, all the individuals who have resolved that their suffering need not define their entire existence, and all who have chosen healing over revenge, despite the apparent ease of the latter. The last time I encountered Colin, he imparted a perspective that has resonated with me constantly since then. He remarked, "Your family was targeted by two individuals who believed the system had so utterly failed them that revenge was the sole available form of justice. Yet your family did not respond with further violence. Instead, you responded with compassion, community building, and understanding. That constitutes the true triumph. Not merely that Morgan and Voss are incarcerated, but that your family opted for a divergent course. I contemplate this daily now, how effortlessly we could have embarked on a different trajectory, how easily I could have allowed rage to consume me, how readily I could have become precisely like the individuals who caused us harm. But I did not. We did not. And that is the legacy that truly matters, not merely survival, but profound transformation. It is the understanding that pain can be alchemized into purpose, that trauma can serve as the foundational bedrock for assisting others, that revenge is a dead end. However, healing, authentic, genuine, and challenging healing, unlocks possibilities one never even knew existed." The narrative concludes. A message to you. Thank you immensely for engaging with this entire story. This chronicled the odyssey of a family shattered by revenge and meticulously rebuilt through the power of compassion. Yet this story transcends the experience of a single family. It speaks to all of us, because any of us could find ourselves in Marcus's position, confined to a hospital bed. Any of us could be Nathaniel, discovering the most trusted individual has perpetrated betrayal. Any of us could face a Morgan or an Adrian Voss. My question to you is this: from where are you currently watching this? Which city? Which country? Please share your location in the comments below. Your input is profoundly meaningful to me. It serves as a powerful reminder that narratives of healing resonate across geographical boundaries and cultural divides. If this story stirred something within you, please consider hitting the like button. Subscribe to this channel for further accounts of betrayal, narratives of revenge, and tales of emotional justice that will linger with you long after viewing. Every subscription contributes to bringing more such stories to individuals who need to hear them. Most importantly, I am eager to know what types of stories you desire me to present. What themes resonate most deeply with you? Do you prefer narratives centered on quiet revenge or emotional justice? Are you interested in stories concerning families rebuilding in the aftermath of trauma? Would you like more narratives featuring Navy SEALs? Are stories about betrayal and subsequent recovery of interest? Please comment below and articulate precisely what you wish to see, and I pledge to craft stories specifically tailored to your preferences. Your input ultimately shapes the future trajectory of this channel. Thank you for your presence here. Thank you for bearing witness to this compelling story. Thank you for reminding me of the inherent importance of this work. Until our next encounter, prioritize your well-being and that of your loved ones. For sometimes, the most profound strength lies not in retaliating, but in actively choosing to heal.